20 years ago, only 1.7% of all Royal Town Planning Institute members were from Black, Asian or minority ethnic groups, compared to 7.9% of the UK general population at that time.
Across my career, although Black women in planning were few and far between, there were some. I can imagine that kind of outside of the M25, it would be quite different.
And I would also say in terms of academia as well, there are very few people in British planning academia that work on race. I probably know most of them. And there are very few people of colour who are professors of planning.
The Positive Action Training Highway, PATH, was a programme delivered under the 1976 Race Relations Act. Its objective was to increase the representation of people from Bame backgrounds in the planning profession. What impact did it have? Let's hear the stories of 4 PATH programme participants.
My name is Lovelace Poco. I'm a Bame Planning and Development Surveyor, and I've been doing this for 20 years. My family wasn't rich, so we grew up in a council estate. Obviously lots of things happen, not very great things, but I think my parents were quite strict with us. We all did sport when we were young, so that a lot of us kept us out of trouble.
After graduating with an engineering degree, Lovelace wasn't sure what to do until his uncle guided him.
He was a recruitment agent, got me to do a psychometric test, and it came up with town planning, and I didn't know what town planning was, so he did a little bit of research for me, told me what it was all about. I went away and then he contacted me to tell me about the PATH National programme, and actually at the time it was called Tomorrow's Planners. It was the London Borough of Hillingdon that actually took me, so I actually interviewed again with them, and luckily enough they saw something in me, and I took up a placement with them.
And I was travelling home one day, and coming on the train I saw the advert for the PATH programme, and that's when I inquired more about it.
Amit was an assistant site manager before joining the PATH programme. He never thought that a train journey would change his life.
At that time it was a high-level drive from government to get BAME background people into professions where there was a lack of representation, and not just planning, there was other professions that they were trying to increase the visibility of black and ethnic minorities. I applied, I was lucky, was successful, had 3 interviews, I think, one with Slough, the other one was Cambridge. Cambridge came in with an offer to take me on their PATH programme. And I say, as they say, the rest is history.
They got their tickets to the planning profession, but there were challenges ahead.
So currently I'm head of climate change at Southend Borough Council. So my role is really about providing strategic leadership and drive for embedding the climate change programme across all corporate activities.
Jo started her PATH placement in 2003 at Southwark Council. She already had a master's degree in environmental risk assessment.
Across my career, although Black women in planning were few and far between, there were some. I can imagine that kind of outside of the M25, it would be quite different. I think expectations around me, what I know, what I can do, have always been lower. I've always had to demonstrate that I am able and capable. I know that a lot of other Black and minority ethnic planners have gone the same route, because you stay in an organisation for 2, 3, 4 years and you're seeing other people that came after you, being accelerated in their career or being supported or getting that kind of water cooler sponsorship, and it doesn't happen for you. and it gets very frustrating and it's very demoralizing. And so I think, that kind of older adage of, you have to work twice as hard was very much true in my experience. And it definitely led me to step out of the permanent space and move into the contracting space, because it's much more straightforward. You are employed because of your skill set to work on a certain project. And once the project is completed, you move on.
This is a scheme where we are developing a backland site, and it was previously garages.
Being a land and development manager at a private consultancy, Lovelace went through similar difficulties.
Being able to progress as quickly as I've seen others has probably been the most challenging. So I've had to adapt, I've had to change, I've had to upskill myself to be on par with perhaps someone who probably hasn't had the same amount of experience as me.
Mongezi wasn't as lucky in securing a role after finishing the PATH programme and a placement with RPS as an environmental consultant trainee. He even thought of going back to Zimbabwe.
But during this recession, I felt like I was at the bottom of the pile, so I felt that was a big challenge. I mean, at the time, many planners were made redundant, but I found a lot of them did manage to get back into work a lot quicker than I did. And I don't know whether that was an aspect of being an ethnic minority. That's one of the reasons why my next role was in local authority, because I felt like I had a better chance of getting into a local authority, because they encouraged Bame people from applying for those jobs.
Progression can be challenging for Bame planners for a range of reasons.
When I first started, I think the language and structure, writing reports, was a critical thing, because English was not my first language. I speak Gujarati at home with mum and dad. I was very inquisitive, being someone who hasn't done planning before, and they liked the fact that I wasn't shy.
Between 2002 and 2007, PATH sponsored 83 trainee planners with enrolment in various part-time planning masters programmes. Only a quarter secured permanent roles across the public or private sectors at the end of the programme. Despite the PATH programme, the proportion of RTPI Bame members is still not representative of the population.
I think if PATH and the councils work together to make a structured programme to get you to the RTPI qualified stage, by having, similar one-to-ones.
Great that we're speaking now, but it's the first time I've had a conversation related to this since 2006, whereas I think if there was someone maybe meeting someone from the organisation once a year to talk about your progression, to talk about how you feel you're developing alongside your peers, I think that would be helpful and make the overall experience much better.
I think there are a lot of lessons that can be learned from other areas where there are a greater proportion of non-white people. So you think about housing, for example, in a local authority context, there are some clear differences. And even though the two disciplines are aligned, there are some clear differences on how Bame people enter the profession, how they're treated throughout their progression, and the opportunities that are presented to them in housing versus in planning. And I think that would be an interesting case study to look at.
Theory, I would hope that there is no Bame, because from my perspective, if there's no Bame, it means that society is equal. And if society is equal, then there would not need to be a specific society for black and minority ethnic planners.
Do you think how long will it be achieved? Like no Bame planner?
A network for Bame planners was founded in 2020. The network was a response to the fact that Bame planners are still underrepresented in planning, and particularly at a senior level. The network has been working with various organisations to improve diversity and inclusion within the planning profession?
I think in terms of institutional kind of cultures, it's still very dominated at the very higher levels by a kind of culture that is exclusionary to people of colour. So I think that kind of framework is problematic. And, you know, we often as planners are thinking about sort of the problems on one hand, but also like the kind of planning vision, although I find planning vision quite problematic. And it's often that we sort of put the kind of issues of race is a kind of in the container of things that are problems. So it's really about understanding, if we're going to have a future looking profession, it has to be a much more diverse profession. And, you know, not just in gender or race, but in all kinds of ways. And I think that's a key strength, to have like different kinds of perspectives and understandings of the world are absolutely kind of the heart of planning.